Welcome back to another episode from SophiaTales Lab. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Now, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's gripping story. People like Margaret Whitfield don't whisper, they perform. They want to be overheard. That's the point. She leaned toward her perfectly styled friend, her lips barely moving, but her words sharp enough to cut steel. My son is so naive to marry this gold-digging nobody from a trash family. Her voice dripped with smugness, and her expression was smug enough to match. I was standing just a few steps away, close enough to hear every syllable. When she realized I'd heard, she didn't flinch. She smiled. But not the polite kind, no. She smiled with pure, proud contempt. The kind that says, I dare you to respond, Dot. So I smiled back. Calm, controlled, dangerous, Dot. And then I walked slowly to the microphone, heels clicking against the marble like a countdown. The room shifted. Conversations died. All eyes turned toward me. I took a deep breath, looked directly at her, and spoke the words that would destroy her perfect little world. What happened next flipped everything upside down. The story she thought she was writing, torn apart. Because in that moment, everything she thought she knew about power, about control, about status began to unravel right in front of her designer heels. If you're watching this and enjoying where this is going, make sure to subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because this isn't just another story about the rich looking down on the rest of us. No, this is about what happens when they finally look up and realize someone's already standing over them. But let's back up for a second, to really understand what happened at that microphone. You have to go back 3 weeks. To be exact, 3 weeks before my daughter Clara's wedding. That's when I met the Whitfields for the first time. I remember pulling up to their country club in my old Honda. It's not flashy. It's not impressive. But it runs like a dream. I've had it for 8 years and never once thought of replacing it. Not because I can't afford a nicer car, but because I've always believed that showing your full hand too early is a rookie mistake. And today, I was anything but a rookie. Margaret Whitfield met me at the grand stone entrance, wearing a Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Her posture was stiff, her smile practiced. Her eyes scanned me up and down like a barcode reader at checkout. She took in my simple black dress, my neat but plain shoes. Her smile widened, but not with kindness. Helena, she said in a voice that was so fake sweet it could rot your teeth. Welcome. But what she really meant was, you're already not good enough. Behind her stood Richard Whitfield. He looked like a man who had long since accepted his place as the quieter half of a sharp-tongued wife. He shook my hand with surprising warmth. But the second Margaret introduced me as Clara's mother, something shifted. That tiny pause. Before mother. Intentional. A message wrapped in silk. You don't belong here. Inside, we were led to a private dining room. Margaret had already arranged the seating. Of course, she placed me directly across from her. The power position. Intimidation 101. So, Helena, she began, slicing her salmon with the cold precision of a surgeon. What do you do for work? Her tone made the question sound more like an accusation. Clara shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't flinch. I manage my own business, I said, taking a calm sip of the overpriced wine they'd chosen for me without asking. Margaret let out a laugh that could have chipped glass. How entrepreneurial. She tilted her head. And where did you go to school? Here. And there? I replied, keeping my tone even. For just a second, her smile wavered. Interesting. Richard. clearly sensing where this was going, tried to redirect. Maybe we should talk about the wedding plans. But Margaret wasn't done. I just think it's so inspiring, she continued, when people from different backgrounds come together. Really shows how far society has come, doesn't it? I saw Clara's cheeks flush. She had no idea that the mother who raised her while waitressing and clipping coupons was also the quiet owner of multiple commercial properties. No clue that her college fund didn't come from luck or charity, but from investments and hustle. But now wasn't the time to reveal all that. Diverse backgrounds do teach you a lot, I said, watching Margaret puff up with confidence. You learn so much about people when they think they have the upper hand. Margaret smiled wider. She thought we were bonding. Exactly. James is so kind. He always wants to help those less fortunate. Ah, there it was. The charity card. To her, my daughter wasn't a woman worthy of love. She was a pet project. Something to fix. Something to uplift. Clara's fork slipped from her fingers. The sound echoed. Mum, maybe we should... It's fine, sweetheart, I said gently, placing a hand over hers. Mrs. Whitfield is just being herself. And that was the moment Margaret realized I wasn't as meek as I looked. Richard tried again. The venue looks beautiful. You must be so excited for the ceremony. Oh, I'm looking forward to it more than you know, I said, locking eyes with Margaret. I have a feeling it's going to be absolutely unforgettable. I slipped the documents into my purse next to my lipstick. Amazing how easily someone's entire world could fit into a handbag, right next to my breath mints and reading glasses. The wedding ceremony was beautiful. Clara looked radiant in her Vera Wang gown, and James couldn't stop smiling. For a moment, watching my daughter marry the man she loved, I almost felt guilty about what I was planning. Almost. But then I remembered Margaret's words at their bridal shop. I remembered the way she'd tried to shame Clara into settling for less. I remembered 30 years of people like Margaret, assuming they could treat me like I was beneath them. The guilt evaporated. During the cocktail hour, I positioned myself near the bar where Margaret was holding court with her social circle. Her voice carried clearly over the gentle hum of conversation. Well, of course we're thrilled, she was saying to a woman draped in Enig diamonds to fund a small country. Though I do worry about James. He's always been so generous with people less fortunate. Sometimes I think his good heart might be taken advantage of. The woman nodded sympathetically. It's wonderful that he's helping that family. Very charitable. Exactly, Margaret continued, not noticing I'd mothered closer. I mean, the mother seems nice enough, but you can tell she's completely out of her depth. The poor thing probably thinks she's hit the jackpot. Her friend glanced around nervously. Margaret. Perhaps. Oh, I didn't mind if she hears, Margaret said, turning to look directly at me with that same contemptuous smile from our first meeting. Helena understands, don't you, dear? We're all just happy for the children. The moment stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. Here's a free life tip. If you're going to insult someone, maybe make sure they can't financially destroy you first. Just a thought. I smiled back and walked calmly to the microphone at the front of the room. Excuse me, everyone, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the reception hall. I'd like to make a toast to the happy couple. The room quieted and I saw Clara beam at me from the head table. Marriage, I began, is about bringing families together. It's about understanding where we come from and where we're going. It's about honesty, respect, and knowing exactly who you're dealing with. Margaret was still smiling, but something in my tone had caught her attention. I'm so grateful to officially welcome the Whitfield family into our lives, I continued. And I think it's time they got to know us a little better. I pulled the leather portfolio from my purse. Some of you might not know that I've been in business for quite some time. I started small, a single apartment building after my husband passed away. But over the years, I've built something I'm quite proud of. Today, my company is worth approximately $80 million. The room went dead silent. Margaret's face had gone from pink to pale to an interesting shade of green. This morning, I said, opening the portfolio, I completed the purchase of some outstanding debt that's been concerning me. You see, I've learned that family takes care of family, and I wanted to make sure the Whitfields never had to worry about their financial obligations sagging. Richard was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. So, Margaret, I said, looking directly at her frozen expression, welcome to the family. As of 900 a.m. today, you work for me. The portfolio slipped from her hands and scattered documents across the marble floor. Game, set, and match. The silent sign in that reception hall was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. 200 of the city's most influential people watching Margaret Whitfield's world collapse in real time. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. Richard had gone completely white and was gripping the edge of our table so hard. His knuckles looked like they might pop through his skin. If you've never seen a bully realize they've been messing with the wrong person, let me tell you, it's absolutely priceless. Helena, Richard finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. What exactly are you saying? I gestured to the scattered papers on the floor. I'm saying that as of this morning, I hold your company's debt, your home mortgage, and controlling interest in your investment portfolio. Every monthly payment you make from now on comes to me. Clara was staring at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been admiration. James looked like he was trying to solve a complex math problem in his head. Margaret finally found her voice. This is some kind of joke. The kind of joke that cost me $14.7 million, I replied. But honestly, watching your face right now, totally worth it. The beautiful thing about karma is that I tax Set's credit cards. Marcus appeared beside me with additional copies of the documents. Always prepared, that man, Mrs. Whitfield, he said politely, handing her a folder. Everything's properly notarized and filed with the county clerk's office. If you have any questions about the terms, your attorney can contact ours. Margaret's hands shook as she opened the folder. Her friend with the diamonds had quietly melted away into the crowd, as had most of Margaret's social circle. Amazing how quickly people disappear when the power dynamic shifts. Margaret looked like she swallowed a cactus, which honestly would have improved her personality. But why? Margaret stammered. We know each other. I stepped closer. To her. Close enough that only she could hear my next words. You called my daughter a charity case. You assumed I was beneath you. You tried to make her settle for less because you thought we couldn't afford better. My voice was calm, almost gentle. I don't like people who underestimate me. Margaret, it never ends well for them. Richard was frantically scanning the documents. Lena, surely we can work something out. There must be some arrangement. Oh, there is, I said, turning back to address the room. It's quite simple, actually. Treat my daughter with the respect she deserves, and we'll get along beautifully. Continue to act like she's not good enough for your family, and I'll exercise every legal right I now have as your primary creditor. James stood up abruptly. Mom, Dad, is this true? Are you really in debt to Helena? The look Richard gave his son. Was answer enough? Clara finally found her voice. Mum, you've been rich this whole time. Comfortably so, I admitted. I just never saw the point in flashing it around. Money should work for you, not define you. Though sometimes I glanced at Margaret, it does come in handy for making a point. Margaret was reading through the documents with growing calculation. Helena, surely we can work out some kind of arrangement. You're a businesswoman. You understand that destroying us won't benefit anyone. I had to admire her attempt at regrouping from shock to strategy in under 10 minutes. That took some backbone. The house, if you foreclose, you'd have to deal with selling it in this market, she continued, warming to her theme. And the company? It's worth more as a going concern than liquidated assets. Richard was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Clara looked torn between admiration and worry. You're absolutely right, I said calmly, which is why I'm offering you the opportunity to maintain your lifestyle and dignity. Under new management, of course. James walked over to his parents, his jaw set in a way I'd never seen before. Dad, how could you let this happen? And Mom, how could you treat Helena like that when you knew you were in financial trouble? We didn't know she was, Margaret started. Rich, Clara interrupted, standing up to join her new husband. You didn't know. She was rich, so you thought it was okay to treat her like garbage. What kind of people are you? The reception had effectively stopped. The band was still playing softly in the background, but every guest was watching our family drama unfold like. It was premium cable television. Margaret's face crumpled. I didn't. I never meant. You meant every word, I said firmly. And that's fine. People like you always show their true colors when they think there are no consequences. The problem is you pick the wrong person to underestimate. Richard stepped forward. Helena, please. We can fix this. Whatever you want. What I want, I said, is very simple. I want my daughter treated like the intelligent, accomplished, beautiful woman she is. I want her marriage to be a source of joy, not a reminder that her husband's family thinks she married up. And I want everyone in this room to understand that the only person who married up today was your son. The gasps from the crowd were audible this time. Margaret looked around at the faces staring at her and seemed to finally understand that her social standing had just shifted dramatically. Now, I said, raising my champagne glass, shall we finish celebrating my daughter's wedding? Because that's what we're here for after all. The band picked up the tempo. Conversations resumed, and Margaret Whitfield learned that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. The rest of their reception passed in a blur of congratulations and barely concealed whispers. Word travels fast in high society. And by the time Clara and James cut the cake, everyone knew that the humble mother of the bride had just become the most powerful person in the room. Margaret spent the remainder of the evening looking like she'd been hit by a truck. She smiled when people spoke to her, but I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. How much did people know? How much would they remember? How dramatically had her social standing just shifted? Richard, to his credit, tried to salvage some dignity. He approached me during the father-daughter dance with his best attempt at a conciliatory smile. Helena, he said, I hope we can move past this and focus on the future for the children's sake. I watched Clara spinning gracefully in my arms, radiant with happiness. The future is entirely up to you, Richard. I'm a reasonable woman. I believe in fair treatment and mutual respect. And if we provide that, then we'll get along beautifully. If not, I shrugged elegantly. Well, let's just say I'm very good at business. The next morning, I was having coffee on my terrace when Marcus called. Margaret Whitfield's assistant called 3 times this morning, he reported. Apparently, Mrs. Whitfield would like to schedule a meeting at your earliest convenience. How polite of her. What did you tell them? That you'd be available Thursday at 2 p.m. in your office. Take it or leave it. Perfect. And Marcus, make sure. She has to wait in the lobby for exactly 15 minutes. I want her to see the awards on the wall, the magazine covers, the photos with governors and senators. You want her to understand exactly who she's been dealing with. Thursday arrived, and Margaret showed up 10 minutes early wearing a conservative black suit that screamed, "I'm trying to look serious and responsible." She spent those 15 minutes in my lobby, taking in the evidence of my success. And by the time my assistant escorted her to my office, she looked properly humbled. "Mrs. Whitfield," I said, not looking up from my desk immediately. "Please have Asiat." She perched on the edge of the chair like she might need to run at any moment. "I suppose you're here to discuss terms," I continued, finally meeting her eyes. "Helena, I want to apologize. I was completely out of line at dinner. And at the wedding, You revealed exactly who you are," I interrupted. "Don't apologize for being yourself, Margaret. It's much more useful when people show their true colors up front." She swallowed hard. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to understand something very clearly. Your son married my daughter because he loves her, not because he's being charitable, not because he's helping someone less fortunate, because he fell in love with an extraordinary woman who happens to be my child." Margaret nodded quickly. "Of course, yes, I see that now." "Do you?" "Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to treat Clara with the same respect you'd show any other member of your family. You're going to include her in family decisions. You're going to stop making comments about her background, her clothes, her car, or anything else that suggests she doesn't belong." "I understand." "I'm not finished." I leaned back in my chair. "You're also going to learn to work with me. Your company needs an influx of capital and better management. I can provide both. We can either do this as partners, or I can simply foreclose, and you can fin new careers." Margaret's face went pale again. "Partners, I'm offering you a chance to maintain some dignity and control. Your husband has good instincts, but poor execution. Your company has potential, that lacks direction. I can fix both problems, but only if you can check your ego at the door." "River can't," I smiled. "Then in 30 days you'll be looking for jobs and a new place to live. Your choice." Margaret sat quietly for a long moment, and I could practically see her pride wrestling with her survival instincts. It was like watching someone's ego get into a cage match with basic math. Reality was winning by a landslide. "What kind of partnership are you proposing?" "The kind where I make the major decisions and you learn to say yes." A.m. When I give you an instruction, my voice was perfectly pleasant. Think of it as an extended lesson in humility. The flush that crept up Margaret's neck told me she was getting the message loud and clear. "I'll need to discuss this with Richard." "Of course, you have until Monday to decide. After that, the offer expires and we move to foreclosure." Margaret stood up on shaky legs. "Helena, I know I don't deserve this consideration after how I treated you. You're right. You don't deserve it. But Clara does. She deserves to have a wedding she can look back on with joy, not as the day her new family imploded. She deserves in-laws who respect her, and she deserves a mother who protects her from people who think they're better than she is." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I understand. I hope you do, because this is your only warning, Margaret. Cross me again and there won't be a third chance." After she left, I poured myself another cup of coffee and looked out at the city skyline. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest gift people could give you. It made the victory so much sweeter. Monday morning arrived with a phone call from Richard at exactly 900 a.m. "We accept your terms," he said without preamble. "Margaret and I discussed it over the weekend and were prepared to move forward as partners." "How gracious of you to accept my generous offer," I replied, not bothering to hide my amusement. "I'll have Marcus draw up the partnership agreements. We'll start with a full audit of your company's operations." "Helena, about Margaret. She's struggling with this situation. She's not used to taking direction. Then she'll learn or she'll find herself looking for a new situation. I'm running a business. Richard, not a rehabilitation center for entitled people. That afternoon, I drove to Clara's new apartment to check on how she was settling into married life. I found her unpacking wedding gifts, but her usual cheerfulness seemed forced. "Mum," she said when I walked in, "we need to talk." I settled onto her couch, which I recognized as a piece from the Whitfield family collection. Wedding gift from the in-laws. Apparently, James told me everything, Clara continued. About the debt, about the company, about the mortgage. He's furious with his parents. But, Mum, why didn't you tell me we had money? I studied my daughter's face. At 25, she looked so much like her father. The same thoughtful eyes, the same stubborn, set to her jaw when she was working through a problem. Do you remember when you were 12 and wanted those expensive jeans that all your friends had? Clara nodded. And I told you we needed to save money for college, so we went to Target instead. Yeah. And he was so embarrassed. I wanted to die. But what happened at school? Clara's expression softened. Katie Morrison made fun of my jeans, called them cheap knockoffs. But instead of being embarrassed, I got angry and told her that having expensive clothes didn't make her a better person. And I realized I was right. The kids who liked me didn't care what brand my jeans were. And the ones who did, well, their opinions didn't matter. I smiled. You wanted you to grow up understanding your own worth, not depending on material things. For confidence, I wanted you to choose friends who cared about who you are, not what you have. But Mom, we could have lived differently. Would you have been happier? Would you have worked as hard in school if you'd known? College was already paid for. Would you have developed the same strength of character if you'd never faced any challenges? Clara was quiet for a moment. Quiet for James says his mother never had to work for anything, that everything was just given to her. And how do you think that shaped her personality? She's not very nice to people she thinks are beneath her. Exactly. Money doesn't make you a better person, Clara. But how you handle having it or not having it reveals who you really are. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Margaret Whitfield is here for the audit meeting. She looks terrified. I showed Clara the text and she actually laughed. Are you going to destroy them? I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. Which might be destruction or it might be salvation. That's entirely up to them. When I arrived at my office, Margaret was indeed waiting in the lobby, looking like she was preparing for her own execution. She traded her usual designer clothes for a conservative business suit that was probably supposed to convey competence and humility. Mrs. Whitfield, I said, breezing past her toward the elevator. Right on time, she hurried to keep up. Helena, before we start, I wanted to say again how sorry I am about actions, not apologies. Interrupted as the elevator doors closed. Show me you've learned something instead of telling me. The audit was brutal. 3 hours of going through their books line by line, examining every contract, every decision, every financial misstep of the past 5 years. Richard had been making decent strategic choices, but horrible tactical ones. Margaret had been treating the company like her personal piggy bank, using corporate credit for everything from her hair appointments to her charity lunch expenses. This, I said, pointing to a line item for $50,000 in consulting fees paid to Margaret's sister. What exactly was she consulting on? Margaret squirmed. She helped with some decorating decisions for the office. $50,000 for decorating advice. She has very good taste. I looked at her for a long moment. Margaret, when I ask you a question about this company's finances, I expect an honest answer, not creative storytelling. Try again. Margaret's face went red. She didn't actually do any consulting. I was helping her through a difficult divorce. So, you stole $50,000 from your company to give your sister a divorce settlement. I wouldn't call it stealing. What would you call it? Thessalance stretched uncomfortably. I made a mistake. Margaret finally admitted. You made a choice, and now we're going to fix it. All of it. By the end of the meeting, I had a complete picture of just how badly they'd mismanaged their business. But I also had something else. A clear understanding that Richard had potential, and Margaret had just been making decisions based on ego rather than logic. Here's what's going to happen, I announced. Richard, you'll focus on client relationships and strategy. That's where your strengths are. Margaret, you'll hand administrative operations under my direct supervision. Every expense over $50 gets approved by me personally. Margaret's jaw dropped. You want me to ask permission for office? Supplies? I want you to learn the value of $1 in the cost of accountability. Consider it part of your education. Richard tried to intervene. Helena, perhaps that's a bit, Richard, I said calmly. Your wife spent $50,000 company dollars on her sister's divorce without telling you. She's charged $3,000 worth of personal spa. Treatments to corporate accounts. She bought a $15,000 handbag and called it a business meeting expense. Did you know about any of this? Richard's face went white as he looked at Margaret. Is this true? Margaret couldn't meet high size. So I continued. Margaret is going to learn to manage money responsibly. Or she's going to find herself learning about unemployment benefits. Your choice, Margaret. For the first time since I'd met her, Margaret Whitfield looked genuinely ashamed. It was a good look on her. Margaret's re-education began immediately. The next morning, she arrived at my office at exactly 8 a.m. 15 minutes. Early, I noted with approval. Carrying a legal pad and wearing an expression of grim determination. I brought the receipts you requested, she said, placing a thick folder on my desk. Every personal expense I've charged to the company over the past 2 years. I flipped through the pages, raising an eyebrow at some of the more creative interpretations of business expenses. A weekend spa retreat in Napa Valley. Business purpose. I wasn't working with other business wives. $500 at a luxury dog grooming salon. Margaret's face reamed. Prince's needed to look presentable for the charity fundraiser photos. Prince's is your dog? Yes, I made a note on my pad. Total amount of personal expenses inappropriately charged to corporate accounts. $127,000 over 2 years. You'll be paying this back at $2,000 per month until it's resolved. Margaret looked like she might faint. I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll get a job. I hear retail establishments are always looking for sole associates. Should be perfect for someone with your people skills. The look of horror on Margaret's face was almost comical. Or, I continued, you can earn it back by proving you're actually capable of contributing to this company's success. Your choice. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Margaret Whitfield get her first real taste of accountability. Every expense report crossed my desk. Every decision required me approval. Every mistake got documented and discussed. The woman who had spent decades treating service staff like they were invisible suddenly found herself in their position, having to ask permission for everything and justify every request. There's something beautifully poetic about watching someone experience the exact treatment they used to dish out. Karma really does have impeccable timing. But something interesting began to happen. Once, Margaret realized I wasn't going to fire her for small mistakes. She started asking better questions, instead offering to hide her confusion about business operations. She began actually learning. Turns out when you remove someone's safety net of entitlement, they either learn to fly or discover they've been a dead weight all along. Helena, she said during our second week of working together, I don't understand why we're not charging the John's son account for the consultation time. They've taken up 40 hours of Richard's time and only paid for 20. Good observation. What would you suggest? That we bill them for the additional hours? And if they refuse to pay, Margaret thought for a moment, then we need to decide if their business is worth the unbilled hours, or if we shoulder for them to a competitor. I made an approving note. Exactly. Draft a memo to Richard outlining your recommendation. But not everyone was adjusting well to the new family dynamic. That Friday, I got a call from Clara. Mom, we need to talk in person. I found her and James in their apartment, both looking serious. Margaret's been making calls, James said without preamble. She contacted 3 of our biggest clients, suggesting they might want to reconsider their relationship with our firm, given the recent changes in ownership. I felt a slow smile spread across my face. Finally, some backbone from Margaret. This was going to be fun. Adorable. She thought 3 phone calls could undo a hostile takeover. Someone clearly never learned how business actually works. She's also been telling her social circle that you ambushed the family, and that she's considering legal action. Clara added, she's trying to turn public opinion against you. Smart strategy, I admitted. Attack my reputation before I can consolidate control. I'm almost impressed. James looked confused. You're not angry? Angry? I'm delighted. This is the first intelligent thing Margaret has done since I met her. Much more interesting than just rolling over and accepting defeat. I looked at my son-in-law, this young man who genuinely loved my daughter and was trying to navigate between his wife and his family's dignity. James, your mother is finally showing some fight. That's the first sign of real character I've seen from her. But she's trying. To damage your bussiness, Clara protested, and failing spectacularly. I've already spoken to all 3 clients. They're more interested in working with someone who has actual financial backing than someone spreading gossip. I poured myself tea from Clara's kettle. Besides, Margaret just gave me valuable information about her mindset. She still thinks this is about social status and reputation. Watching someone try to fight a financial war with social media tactics is like watching someone bring a butter knife to a gunfight, isn't it? James asked. For her, yes. For me, this was always about respect. And now Margaret is showing me she's capable of strategic thinking instead of just passive aggression. That's progress. Clara shook her head. Only you would see someone trying to sabotage you as a positive development. Margaret spent 3 weeks trying to figure out how to fight back. She developed a plan, identified my potential vulnerabilities, and executed a coordinated attack. 6 months ago, she would have just cried and complained to Richard. That evening, Margaret called me herself. Helena, I think we got off on the wrong foot with this business arrangement. Did we? I thought we understood each other perfectly. I've been reconsidering your partnership offer. Perhaps we could discuss modified terms, something more collaborative. I had to admire her persistence. 2 failed strategies, and she was already working on a 3rd angle. Margaret, what exactly are you proposing? Equal partnership, 50-50th split of decisions and profits. We both bring valuable assets to the table. The audacity was breathtaking. I actually laughed. You have to admire someone who can lose everything and still think they're in a position to negotiate. That takes either incredible confidence or complete delusion. Margaret, 3 days ago, you tried to sabotage my relationships with my own clients. Now you want equal partnership. I was testing your business acumen, making sure you could handle pressure. How thoughtful of you, testing the person who holds your mortgage and your husband's livelihood. I let the silence stretch. Here's my counteroffer. You can continue working under my supervision and learn to run a business properly. or I can foreclose. On Monday, your choice. The silence was so thick you could have cut it with a bankruptcy notice. Helena, the original term stand, Margaret. The only thing that's changed is that now I know you're capable of strategic thinking. Use it wisely. Sometimes the best way to break someone's pride is to let them exhaust all their options first. Thanksgiving arrived with the kind of autumn weather that makes you believe in fresh starts. Clara and James were hosting at their apartment, and for the first time since the wedding, both families would be sitting around the same table. I arrive ideally to help with preparations, finding Clara in the kitchen looking stressed. "What if this is a disaster?" she asked, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "What if Margaret says something awful? What if you two start fighting? What if you take a deep breath and remember that you're a married woman hosting her first family dinner?" I suggested, taking the knife away before she injured herself. "This is your house, your rules. Anyone who can't behave like a civilized adult can leave." Margaret and Richard arrived precisely on time, bearing flowers and what appeared to be genuine nervousness. Margaret had traded her usual Powers suits for a simple dress that was elegant without being showy. "Clara, dear," Margaret said, presenting the flowers. "Thank you for hosting. The apartment looks beautiful." I watched carefully, but the compliment seemed sincere. Dinner conversation was fascinating to watch. Clara expertly guided discussions that highlighted her guests' achievements without making them sound boastful, while simultaneously exposing the shallowness of Margaret's usual social metrics. When Margaret mentioned her charity work, Dr. Williams shared stories about actual systemic change. When Margaret tried to steer toward designer topics, Maria talked about her innovative business strategies. When Margaret brought up exclusive social events, Janet discussed her mentorship programs for underprivileged entrepreneurs. I caught Clara's eye across the table and saw her slight wink. My daughter was systematically deconstructing Margaret worldview, without raising her voice or making a single direct criticism. Watching someone get educated by people fee would have previously dismissed as beneath them is pure poetry in motion. Margaret Clara said during dessert, "I was thinking about what you said last week about wanting to contribute more meaningfully to the business. Maria's been looking for an experienced project manager for her new community development initiative." Margaret's thought paused. Community development, affordable housing construction. Maria explained, "We're building homes for families who've been priced out of the market. It's challenging work. Lots of bureaucracy, community relations, budget management, but incredibly rewarding." It sounds Margaret searched for words. Very hands-on. Absolutely. No delegating to assistants or hiding behind a desk. You'd be working directly with families, contractors, city planners. Maria's enthusiasm was genuine. "Clara mentioned you have experience with project coordination." I watched Margaret's face carefully. This was Clara's master stroke, offering Margaret a chance to prove herself in an environment where her old attitudes would be immediately exposed and corrected. The look on Margaret's face was priceless, like Simeone had just offered her a chance to vacation in a maximum security prison. I need to learn quite a bit," Margaret admitted. "We all did," Janet added. "The difference between managing people and actually leading them is something you can only learn by doing." As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Margaret lingered in the kitchen while Richard waited by the door. "Clara," she said quietly, "that was illuminating. I hoped it would be. Your friends are impressive women. They're women who've built their own success instead of inheriting it." Clara replied matter-of-factly, "I thought you might find their perspectives interesting." Margaret nodded slowly. "I believe I understand what you were showing me tonight." "What's that?" "That there's a difference between having wealth and having worth, and that the people I've been trying to impress might not be worth impressing." Clara smiled. "That's up to you to decide, Margaret. But I thought you should know what real achievement looks like. After they left, Clara and I cleaned up in comfortable silence. That was masterfully done, Ifnally said. I learned from the best, Clara replied. Sometimes the most effective lesson is showing someone what they could become instead of just criticizing what they are. My daughter had definitely inherited more than just me money. She'd inherited my talent for turning someone's world upside down and making them thank you for it. Christmas morning brought an unexpected delivery to my penthouse. A handwritten card from Margaret attached to a small wrapped box. Helena, the card read, I wanted you to have this. It belonged to my grandmother, and she always said it's all go to the strongest woman in the family. I think we both know who that is now. Thank you for saving us from ourselves, Margaret. Inside the box was an antique pearl brooch, clearly worth a small fortune and obviously a family heirloom. I was still staring at it when Clara called. Mum, did you get Margaret's gift? Just opened it. This is significant. She gave me Grandmother Whitfield's silver tea service. Clara said. James nearly cried. He said she's never given anyone family pieces before. How are things with them generally? Honestly, better than I ever expected. Margaret asks about my writing, actually listens to my answers, and she's been taking me to lunch once a week. No agenda, no lectures about proper behavior. We just talk. This was more progress than I dared hope for. That afternoon, I arrived at Clara and James' apartment for Christmas dinner to find an interesting scene. Margaret was in the kitchen wearing an apron, actually cooking, while Richard and James watched a football game. The dynamic was completely different from our first family gathering. Helena, Margaret called when she saw me. Perfect timing. I'm attempting your mother's stuffing recipe that Clara shared with me. My mother's recipe? Clara, I never gave you that recipe. Clara grinned. I may have embellished a bit, but Margaret really wanted to make something special, and she's been so nervous about today. I found Margaret in the kitchen, flour in her hair, and a look of intenser concentration on her face. How's it going? I've never actually cooked a full meal before, she admitted. We always had staff or catered or went to restaurants. But I wanted to do this myself. Why? Margaret paused in her stirring. Because family meals should be made with care, not just ordered like a business transaction. Because Clara deserves to be treated like family, not like a guest we're trying to impress. The transformation continued to amaze me. Dinner was delicious, despite Margaret's fears. More importantly, the conversation flowed naturally. No one was walking on eggshells. No one was putting on airs, and Margaret treated waitstaff at the nearby restaurant where we got dessert with genuine courtesy. Amazing what a little financial ruin can do for someone's manners. Should really be prescribed more often. But the real test came after dinner, when James made an announcement. Clara and I have some news, he said, taking his wife's hand. We're pregnant. The explosion of joy around the table was immediate. Richard stood up to hug them both. I felt tears spring to my eyes. And Margaret burst into tears. I'm going to be a grandmother, she sobbed. I'm going to have a grandchild, and I almost, if you hadn't forgiven me, if I'd been too proud to change. Clara got up and hugged her mother-in-law. Margaret, you are going to be an amazing grandmother. You've already changed so much. I want to be worthy of this baby, Margaret said. I want to be someone they can be proud of. You will be, Clara assured her. Later, as Margaret and I were alone in the kitchen cleaning up, she turned tone. Helena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. All right. Do you think I can really change? I mean, permanently? Or am I just behaving because I'm scared of the consequences? I considered her question carefully. 3 months ago, I would have said people like you never really change. You just get better at hiding where you are. And now I think you've discovered that you actually like being a better person. The question is whether you'll stick with it when it gets difficult. Margaret nodded. I've been thinking about that, too. About what happens when you're not watching over my shoulder anymore. What do you think will happen? I think I've learned to watch over my own shoulder, to ask myself before I speak or act. Is this the person I want to be? Is this how I want to treat people? And what's the answer usually? Usually that the old Margaret would have been unkind and the new Margaret chooses to be better. I smiled. That's a good system. Helena, can I tell you something that might sound strange? Go ahead, being humbled. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I spent 60 years thinking I was superior to everyone around me, and I was miserable. I was lonely, even surrounded by people. No one really liked me. They just tolerated me, because of Richard's business connections. And now Clara actually wants to spend time with me. James talks to me about real things instead of just polite small talk. Richard looks at me like he's proud of what I'm becoming. Even your staff at the office treat me with respect instead of fear. That's because you're treating them with respect instead of disdain. Exactly. Margaret wiped down the counter with more care than I'd ever seen her apply to any task. I wish it hadn't taken being financially destroyed and publicly humiliated to learn these lessons, but I'm grateful it happened, even though it was brutal. Especially because it was brutal. Gentle correction would have worked on me. I was too arrogant, too set in my ways. I needed to be completely broken down before I could be built back up into someone worth being. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us all here. Margaret Whitfield had gone from entitled socialite to genuine human being. Clara had gained a mother-in-law who actually valued her. James had parents he could respect again. And I had discovered that sometimes the most satisfying victory isn't destroying your enemy, it's transforming them into an ally. Spring brought new challenges and new growth. Margaret had not only mastered her role in the company, but had begun suggesting genuine improvements to our operations. Her insights into the social networks of our client base proved invaluable. And a reformed attitude made her surprisingly effective at client relations. Helena, she said during our weekly review meeting, I've been thinking about the Morrison account, the real estate development deal. Yes, they're struggling to get community buy-in for their project because they're approaching it like conquistadors instead of neighbors. I leaned back in my chair. Explain. They're offering the community a take it or leave it proposal instead of asking what the community actually needs. If we help them restructure their approach, community meetings, local commitments, shared profit arrangements, they'd get better results and we'd cement their loyalty. It was a sophisticated analysis that showed genuine understanding of both business strategy and human psychology. Put together a proposal, I said. If Morrison accepts it, you'll handle the community outreach personally. Margaret's face lit up. Really? Really? But Margaret, this is a significant responsibility. If you mishandle it, I won't, she said firmly. I promise you I won't let you down. The Morrison project became Margaret's chance to prove herself completely. I watched from a distance as she organized community meetings, listened to concerns with genuine attention, and worked tirelessly to find solutions that benefited everyone involved. The woman who hadn't dismissed people based on their zip codes was now spending her evenings in community centers, learning about the real needs of working families. If someone had told me a year ago that Margaret Whitfield would voluntarily attend community budget meetings, I'd have recommended immediate psychiatric evaluation. Yet, here we were. How did the meeting go last night? I asked after her third community session. Eye-opening, Margaret admitted. I spent an talking to Maria Santos about her concerns for her children's safety near the construction site. 6 months ago, I would have dismissed her worries as an obstacle to overcome. Now, I understand she's a mother protecting her children. Her concerns are completely valid, and I worked with Morrison's engineers to redesign the safety protocols and construction timeline to address her specific concerns. It added $50,000 to the project cost that wagoned the support of the entire neighborhood. This was the Margaret I've been hoping to create. Someone who saw people as individuals rather than obstacles. But our real test came in June when Clara went into early labor. Irish to the hospital to find chaos. James was pacing the waiting room. Richard was on the phone with Dr. San Margaret. Margaret was holding Clara's hand in the delivery room, coaching her through contractions with Akon competence that surprised everyone. "That's it, sweetheart," I heard her saying as I entered. "You're doing beautifully. Just breathe through it." Clara squeezed Margaret's hand. "I'm scared." "I know. But you're the strongest woman I know." "Well," Margaret glanced at me with a smile. "One of the strongest, and we're all here for you." 4 hours later, Emma Catherine Whitfield made her entrance into the world. And I watched Margaret Whitfield completely melt. "She's perfect," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held her granddaughter for the first time. "Clara, she's absolutely perfect. Do you want to hold her, Helena?" Clara asked. I took my granddaughter in my arms. This tiny person who represented the future of our complicated, rebuilt family. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "You have no idea how many people fought to make sure you'd be born into a family that knows how to love properly." Margaret overheard and laughed through her tears. That's one way to put it. Over the next few weeks, I watched Margaret throw herself into grandmother duties with the same intensity she'd once applied to social cleaning. She researched car seats with the thoroughness of a federal safety inspector. She baby-proofed their house like she was preparing for a presidential visit. She read every parenting book published. In the last decade, watching a former socialite become a helicopter grandmother is like watching someone discover they actually have a heart. Who knew it just needed the right motivation to start working? "Margaret," I said one afternoon, finding her reorganizing Clara's baby supplies for the 3rd time. "You know, babies don't need color-coordinated everything, right?" "I know," she said, not pausing in her folding. "But I want Emma to have the best of everything. Not the most expensive everything. The best. The safest car seat. The most nutritious formula as backup. The most educational toys. She's 6 weeks old. She mostly needs to eat and sleep." Margaret stopped, folding, and looked at me. "Helena, I spent James's entire childhood delegating his care to nannies and boarding schools. I missed his first steps, his first words, his first day off school. I thought money could replace presents. And now I understand that presence is the only gift that actually matters. I want to be here for Emma in ways I never was for James." It was another piece of the puzzle falling into place. But Margaret's real graduation moment came when Clara asked her to host a baby shower. "I want you to plan it," Clara said. "Something elegant but not intimidating. I want my friends to feel welcome, not like they're being judged." I watched Margaret's face carefully. This was a test of everything she'd learned about treating people with respect, regardless of their background. The shower was perfect. Margaret had chosen a beautiful but understated venue, planned activities that were fun without being precious, and created an atmosphere where Clara's college friends felt just as comfortable as the Whitfield family's social circle. Most importantly, I watched Margaret genuinely connect with people she would have dismissed a year earlier. She spent 20 minutes talking to Clara's friend Jenny about her job as a social worker, asking intelligent questions and showing real interest in her work. "Helena, Margaret said as we cleaned up afterward. Thank you for what this time? For forcing me to become someone worthy of that little girl. Someone she can be proud to call grandmother. I looked around the room at the happy chaos of wrapping paper and baby gifts. At Clara glowing with joy as she opened her presents from people who genuinely cared about her. You did the work, Margaret. I just provided the motivation. The best motivation I ever received, she said. Though I hope I never need such dramatic intervention. Again. That, I said with a smile, is entirely up to you. 1 year later, I stood at another microphone. But this time the circumstances were entirely different. The Whitfield family was hosting their annual charity gala, and Margaret had insisted that I give a keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, I began looking out at the elegant crowd. A year ago, I learned something important about the difference between having money and having class. I found Margaret in the audience sitting at the head table with Clara and James. Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. Class isn't about your bank account or your zip code. It's not about your clothes or your car or which country club accepts your membership. Class is about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. It's about lifting others up instead of putting them down. It's about recognizing that everyone deserves dignity and respect. The audience was listening intently. This past year, I've had the privilege of watching someone discover what real class looks like. I've seen Margaret Whitfield transform from someone who used her wealth as a weapon into someone who uses it as a tool for building others up. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. The woman who once looked down on people for having less now spends her weekends volunteering at literacy programs. The woman who used to judge others by their appearance now mentors young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The woman who thought her money made her superior has learned that true superiority comes from service to others. I paused, making eye contact with Margaret. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to become better than they were. Margaret took that chance and ran with it. She didn't just change her behavior, she changed her heart. The applause was thunderous. After the speech, Margaret approached me with tears in her eyes. Helena, I need to tell you something. What's that? The day you bought our debt and humiliated me at the wedding. It was the worst day of my life, but it was also the best day of my life. How so? Because it was the day I stopped being someone. Didn't really like and started combing someone I could respect. Behind her, I could see Clara and James watching us. Emma now awake and gurgling contently. Margaret, can I ask you something? Anything. If you could go back and change what happened that day, would you? Margaret thought for a long moment. A year ago, I would have said yes in a heartbeat. Today, she shook her head. I wouldn't change a single moment because it led me here to this life, to this family, to this version of myself that I actually like, even though it was painful, especially because it was painful. The easy lessons never stick. The hard ones change you forever. She looked over at Emma, who was reaching tiny, hands toward the chandeliers. You want to be worthy of her love, Margaret said. I want to be the kind of grandmother she can look up to, not thinking she has to make excuses for. You already are. Thanks to you. Thanks to you doing the work. As the evening wound down, I found myself on the balcony overlooking the city, a glass of champagne in my hand, and a sense of satisfaction I'd never experienced before. Clara joined me, Emma in her arms. Mom, what you said tonight about Margaret, did you really mean it? Every word. She's become like a second mother to me. Clara said, I never expected that. The best outcomes are often the ones we never see coming. Emma made a soft cooing sound, and I reached out to stroke her tiny cheek. What do you think, little one? I asked her. Do you approve of your complicated family? Emma responded by grabbing my finger and holding on tight. I think that's a yes. Clara laughed. James appeared in the doorway. There you are. Mum's looking for you, Helena. She wants to discuss the expansion plans for their community center project. I smiled. Margaret had proposed using part of the company's profits to build a community center in an underserved neighborhood. It was exactly the kind of project the old Margaret would have opposed as not profitable enough. Tell her I'll be right there. As Clara and James headed inside, I took one last look at the city screen. A year ago, I'd been content to hide my success, to let people underestimate me. Now, I was actively using my resources to reshape lives and communities. Margaret had learned that true power comes from building others up, not tearing them down. But in teaching her that lesson, I'd learned something too. Sometimes the most satisfying victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's turning them into your greatest ally. Turns out the best revenge isn't destroying someone's life. It's teaching them how to build a life actually worth living. I raised my champagne glass to the city lights. To family, I said aloud, the one you're born into and the one you choose to build. Inside, I could hear Margaret's laughter as she played with Emma, Richard discussing business strategy with James, and Clara planning her next writing project. It was the sound of a family that had learned to value what truly mattered, and it was the sweetest victory of all. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story. In the comments, your voice matters.